for one thing, it's got too many Francos. I feel about the Franco family the way I do about the Mara family. There's too many fucking Francos. There's too many Maras. I need like 2 less.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode 5. I'm your host, Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm back on the West Coast, which is the best coast.
Woohoo!
I'm joined by Carolyn Pettit.
Hello.
And Ebony Astor.
What's up, weirdos?
This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we are the feminist killjoys coming for your media. I like that last one. On today's show, we're going to check in with the latest pop culture news, dive into The Disaster Artist, the movie about the worst movie ever made, and discuss Wolfenstein II and some of our feelings on modern-day AAA video game shooters. And as always, exclusively for our amazing, wonderful drip backers, we'll be recording a bonus segment. This week, there's been so much pop culture news and announcements that we're going to react to things like the Video Game Awards, Spider-Man and Jessica Jones announcements, Campo Santo's new game, In the Valley of the Gods, that god-awful Ready Player One, and more. We couldn't do this podcast without all the support from our drip backers. This podcast is entirely listener-supported on Kickstarter's new monthly crowdfunding subscription service, Drip. So, if you like what you hear, please consider chipping in by visiting d.rip/femfreak. The last tiny little bit of housekeeping before we get on with the show is, as some of you might know, Feminist Frequency is currently in the middle of our end-of-year fundraising campaign. Through all of our articles, videos, and podcasts, we strive to provide our viewers with media literacy tools to better understand intersectional feminism and apply it in their own lives. We really believe that media matters and that media can change the world for the better. Help us keep doing this work and help us keep it free for everyone. We're halfway to our goal of $25,000. Can you help us raise the rest? Just visit feministfrequency.com/donate. If you can contribute $5, $10, $200, anything you can give makes a huge, huge difference, and we thank you endlessly. Now, on with the show. Hey, look!
Hi!
I'm back in the studio.
Yeah, so Anita and I are actually in the same room for the first time because you were all over Europe every episode we've recorded up to this point.
I know.
Yeah.
It was a little bit weird to be like, hey, let's launch a podcast. I'm going to be gone for a month.
The timing was not exactly ideal on that.
Yeah.
It certainly led to some additional challenges.
What are you talking about? Challenges.
Time
Whatever.
zones and things.
Ebony's still down there in LA, which is on fire.
Yeah. How's that?
Yeah,
How are you,
but
Ebony?
I'm keeping a watchful eye on the news. I have a go bag ready to go, but
Oh, man.
being the, Tom Joad-esque figure that I am, I always keep a go bag ready to go anyway. I'm always ready to ride the rails.
Is it
hit
on
the
a
ground
stick, like a
tumbleweed.
bag?
Ain't
One of
nothing
those
new.
bags on the end of a stick, like that you just
A bindle. Yeah,
sling
I got
over
a
your shoulder,
bindle.
a bindle. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
With a couple of
Perfect.
cans of beans, and I'm hoping that I can steal our producer's dog to be my companion on the road, so
I'm
that
sure
I'm
Phil
not
would
alone.
love that.
Uh,
All right, Carol.
Yeah.
We got a lot of pop culture checking-ins this
We
week.
sure do. Let's start with some news having to do with the next film in the Fantastic Beasts series. Johnny Depp plays the character
Ew.
of Grindelwald in these films. And the next film, it was a smaller part in the first film, but the second film is actually called Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, from which we can, assume that his part is going to be more significant. And in response to increasing uproar and pressure from fans, viewers from social media that Johnny Depp should not be in these films because he is an abuser. Both the director of the film, David Yates, and J.K. Rowling released statements within the past week about his inclusion in the film, both of which I find really troubling. First, what David Yates, the director, had to say is this statement, which I think is a sort of defense we so often hear of men who commit abuse. He says, I can only tell you about the man I see every day. He's full of decency and kindness, and that's all I see. Whatever accusation was out there doesn't tally with the kind of human being I've been working with. Right? So we all know Johnny Depp goes to children's hospitals dressed as Jack Sparrow, and that he does nice things. That doesn't
It doesn't mean he didn't beat the shit out of his wife.
People cannot reconcile the idea of a person simultaneously doing like really kind things and doing really horrible things.
And that's the thing too, is like you see all these men who write it off as like a joke, right? Like there's an article that oh god, I'm so sorry I'm forgetting her name, but there was another accusation against Dustin Hoffman that was excruciating to read, and like he literally assaulted her every night of their live performance, and it was just written off as a joke, right? And so like it's really easy for other men to defend these dudes because you're like, well, they don't do it to you, right? Like they're not experiencing it.
Well, and other women too, horribly,
true.
right? So, like, you have the case of someone like Lena Dunham, being an example par excellence of, the only good abuser is my friend, the abuser. So, like, I don't know them in their abusive capacity. They're never shitty to me personally. I didn't see it happen. So I feel, unqualified to address these allegations. And it's like, you don't feel unqualified to address these allegations when they're safely away from you, when it might as well be in the abstract. But when, the rubber meets the road and you actually have to stand on principle, you suddenly become, hear no evil, see no evil. Miss me with that.
And speaking of that, perhaps even more damaging in some ways than David Yates' statement is J.K. Rowling's statement herself. She came out, she published a statement on her website that basically referred to the Harry Potter filmmaking community as a huge mutually supportive community. And she said, I accept that there will be those who are not satisfied with our choice of actor in the title role. However, conscience isn't governable by committee. Within the fictional world and outside it, we all have to do what we believe to be the right thing. Like, how can you believe that in keeping Johnny Depp in these films is the right thing? Like, what kind of statement is that?
Especially as the person who wrote one of the biggest media franchises in the world that is predicated on, like, justice, right?
Ethics.
And like, exactly. Which again, another conversation for another time is how you can left read or right read into Star Wars and Harry Potter and all this stuff that like the principles may or may not be super clear there, or are more the words, whatever,
like explicit.
Right. Like they're so generic that it doesn't matter. Yeah. But at the same time, like, the Harry Potter world has meant a lot to a lot of people, including us, and or me. I don't. I guess I shouldn't speak for everyone else.
The whole history of J.K. Rowling's political relationship with her own creation is super fascinating because, like, in the UK, right, all these people who grew up with Harry Potter and loved it took to calling Jeremy Corbyn Dumbledore, right? And J.K. Rowling is more, neoliberal, and she was explicitly saying Corbyn is not Dumbledore. Yeah. And so, like, it's so kind of become a thing that's, she can't control it anymore, but, and people make it their own, and they relate to it in their own ways.
And, like, I'm probably not going to go see it.
Right.
Like, it's not, I'd have a really hard time watching that, right? So, like, that sucks.
I just have a question. Is it? Do they know something we don't know about Johnny Depp being the only actor left accepting roles?
Oh God. Yeah.
Like these people, these defenses, like, oh, if we, don't, allow people the opportunity to grow, or if we don't forgive them, we're going to lose all of these, male geniuses or male creators that we love. And it's like, yeah, but what about all of the women, and other folks who they have preyed upon, right? Whose genius we'll never know. But also, is there like a hard cap on actors right now, such that if Johnny Depp isn't in this role, the movie can't be made? J.K. Rowling, you, oh boy, profound misstep.
Absolutely.
Somebody quit hiring Johnny Depp.
And in other pop culture news, the Game Awards took place this past week. And there's so many things from the Game Awards that we could talk about. But I think the one thing that people are talking about more than anything else is this, like, 8-minute trailer for Hideo Kojima's next game, Death Stranding. It was just the most, like, self-indulgent, mind-boggling thing, that anyone has ever seen.
Do you want to tell us what it's about?
So I do want to tell you, there's a
I would love it if you did.
On GameSpot.com, there's a hilarious headline about the trailer that says, Death Stranding trailer makes sense after playing 4 to 5 hours, Sony exec claims. So it's like after you play 4 or 5 hours of the game, then you'll be like, oh, now I get what was happening in the trailer.
I feel like that's always the defense. Like, you'll understand when you play the game.
Yeah, but
we've heard that before from them.
And what's kind of frustrating to me about the reaction to this trailer is, a lot of the people who are oohing and ahhing and talking about what a genius, what an auteur, what a visionary Hideo Kojima is, are a lot of the same people who, if they went to like a gaming event, any event where indie games and different games were being shown, and they encountered a game that was at all like abstract or unconventional or like artsy, would probably be like, what the fuck is this, right? But because it's Kojima, like, we give him the benefit of the doubt, and we think, well, it must be super meaningful and brilliant because it's Kojima. And,
baby giving a thumbs up is really meaningful.
That is like the most Kojima thing I can imagine.
It's just like, it's just more bro-y bullshit. That's like weird. Like, I'm like, is this dude tripping on acid all the time? Like, is he ever sober?
I'm into it. As a non-gamer, and feel free to at me at Ebony Aster and be like, why are you even talking about this? But I watched the 2 trailers that were available, and I was like, okay, what is happening here? Question 2, is this at all representative of what's going on in games right now? Because if so, this kind of like mind trip, kind of mushrooms session, I'm into it. I have no idea what's happening here. My third question was, like, when is someone going to send me that baby thumbs up as a GIF so I can make it my avatar in absolutely everything? So at Ebony Aster, hit me up with that GIF.
I'm with Carol on this, though. I'm really tired of these, like, dudes that are considered, like, geniuses in everything they do uncritically. And if you ever criticize them or anything about what they do, it's like blasphemy.
You don't get it. You just don't get it.
The reality is that, let's say a woman came out of nowhere with this trailer, and the exact same trailer, maybe without the like celebrity element, people would not be having this kind of reaction to it, right? I don't think there's any woman really who would be given that kind of benefit of the doubt about her creative genius.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So,
but before we leave, I just want to say anything though that stars or utilizes the talents of Mess Mickelson.
Why the fuck is he in this shit?
I know.
Oh, that made me so sad.
I wanted to go. Yeah.
For me,
for
me and all right-thinking people around the globe.
80-hour game when it comes out.
I love him. I just wish he'd go back to making great Danish movies.
All right, let's get into the show.
Yeah.
Okay, so The Disaster Artist.
Yeah.
We all went to see it. Okay, I gotta confess something, which is not a confession because I'm not embarrassed by this in any way. I literally have never heard of The Room before this summer. So I heard about it.
What?
When I was.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Anita,
I
Marie,
literally have never heard
Matilda,
about this movie.
Betty, Rose, Dorothy, Sarkeesian. How have you never heard of The Room?
I don't know, man. I have no fucking idea. But so I was hanging out with a friend when we were hanging out with Tom Bissell, and then Greg shows up, and I don't know who he is. I think he's just like a friend coming to hang out with the group. And then they start talking about The Disaster Artist, the book that they co-wrote that's about this movie. And I was like, all right. And like, they're like, here, have a copy of the book. I was like, all right. Cool. I guess I'll go. And they I guess I'll go watch The Room that this is based on before I read your book that you wrote. Like, it was just this so benign thing that happened. And then I looked it up and was like, what the fuck is this? And they were also kind of flabbergasted that I'd never heard of it or didn't know what it was or hadn't seen it. So they were like, oh my God, you have to tell us what you think after you watch it. So in September, I got a couple friends together, one of which hadn't seen it and watched The Room for the first time. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, okay, I know we're talking about The Disaster Artist, but I just gotta say, like, I do not understand the obsession with shitty movies. Like, I'm not one of those people that's just like, I can watch the fuck out of this whole... It was excruciating to watch.
For me, what's sort of interesting about the Room as just a cultural artifact, and that I'm disappointed that The Disaster Artist didn't like explore more, is there's this principle called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And that basically, it's a psychological principle that that talks about how people who have like no sense of what it means to be good in a particular area think that they are superior because they have no idea what the basic skill set is. And Tommy Wiseau is absolutely, like, he doesn't understand fundamentally what makes what constitutes good acting or good writing or good anything. But he thinks that he does, right? And so, and the room seems to be, like, because he has these tremendous reserves of money and everything, the room seems to be a product of that. Like, it's very much, like, I used to get at GameSpot these private messages from people who objected to something I would do in my reviews, and they'd always say things like, I could do this job 1,000,000 times better than you, but the sentence would be, like, so many misspellings and grammar errors, they clearly didn't even understand, like, the fundamentals of basic competent writing, much less, like, good writing. And so, you know, Tommy Wiseau has that going on, but with, like, acting and writing and, like, filmmaking. And I guess I just wish the film dug more into, like his psychology of, like, where does this impulse to create this thing, like, come from? Or what does it, like, mean to him? But I felt it was a very kind of surface level film. In that sense. Like, it was just presented to be, like, entertaining and funny, but not, like, to actually kind of get into
Wait, are you talking about The Room or The Disaster
Artist? I'm talking about The Disaster Artist. I'm sorry.
That's
yeah.
Okay.
I've never seen The Room, and I probably will never see The Room. And so, well, let me back up here. We need to get our producer to create a music tag for Ebony's Hypocritical Hot Takes, because I'm about to offer a piping hot fresh one. I love shows like Mystery Science Theater 3000, podcasts like How Did This Get Made? I love kind of the unpacking of films that aim high, that have incredible ambition, but fail miserably for whatever reason. You know, I love unpacking that, finding out, like, sometimes it's interesting because, you know, you'll disagree that a movie, you know, is good or bad. But nevertheless, it's great to be part of a community of people who are talking about it and sort of, like interrogating all of the pieces that go into making a movie. But this movie, The Room, rather, it's just something that never really interested me. I don't know. There's something about it that makes me feel very uncomfortable. This kind of like
the rampant misogyny.
Well, that could be it, but it's, it's taking a step back. The culture of people watching The Room, there's just something distasteful to me about it. And again, this is hugely hypocritical of me. I realize that. So don't at me about this particular issue. But there's something about, like, oh, ha, 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 we're so much cooler and funnier and we get it, in a way that these people who were in the film did not get it. And I don't know. So
I really enjoyed The Disaster Artist. I was laughing a lot. And, like, there was something about the whole, like, I went by myself and I would sort of chuckle and the guy next to me would start chuckling in response to me laughing. Like, there was a lot of, like, camaraderie happening in the space. So I think that they did a really good job of, like, telling this story and showing these people and, like, how this came to be. I was disappointed, though, in, like, The Room is super misogynist, like, just aggressively so, and that was not addressed in The Disaster Artist at all. And, like, you could see the like possessiveness and the jealousy of Tommy when Greg got a girlfriend, but, like, that was the extent of it.
And that was another big problem I had with the film, was that it's way too easy on Tommy in the end. Like, because he's so he's so, like, abusive and controlling, like, psychologically in some ways to Greg and to the crew, at least as he's depicted in this film. And then in the end, there's just, like, this heartwarming kind of reconciliation and like, hey, Tom, look what you made, Tommy, you did this thing.
I completely agree.
He's never made to, like, account for, like, the film does not take him to task for how he behaved.
Yeah, and, like, he was straight up abusive to people on set. Like, that looked like a miserable, horrifying experience. And, like, the fact that it was just like, Greg who I don't know, like, the realities of how, like, everything played out. Like, this is obviously Hollywoodized in a lot of ways. And it's probably sanitized in a lot of ways too. But like, yeah, that really bothered me towards the end where it's like, well, he gets a pass. And like, you know, he's really sad that his like great auteur like film thing didn't work out. And then everyone thinks it's funny. And so he just sort of like rolls with the punches and accepts that it's now a funny thing and everything's cool. And you're like, but it's not even a little bit. Like, you don't get to treat people that way. And so it tailed off for me towards the end where I was kind of like, man, that's such a, of course they're going to end it this way, but I didn't like it.
I loved, again, this goes back to, the kind of things that I watch that do unpack horrible movies. So, like, how did this get made? All of the principals from that podcast, like Jason Mantzoukas, Paul Scheer, June Diane Raphael, were in this movie. And I loved that they were in it. People like Hannibal Buress, Megan Mullally. Like, I loved that they were in this movie. But the movie itself bored me to tears. I checked my phone like 40 times. Counting down, getting out of there. For one thing, it's got too many Francos. I feel about the Franco family the way I do about the Mara family. There's too many fucking Francos. There's too many Maras. I need like 2 less.
Here's the thing. I am not a fan of James Franco by any stretch of the imagination. I could not get over how fucking good he was. Like, I actually had moments of being like, I know that's not Tommy, but holy shit. Like, I just feel like he can act. Like, he really embodied that role in a way that I was just, like, really impressed with.
Right. I think there's something similar between, like, James Franco and somebody like Nicolas Cage, in a sense, which is that they always make choices, and even when they're not good choices, they're, like, interesting choices. As actors. Yeah. But what was super weird to me about the casting of Greg... Of James Franco's brother as Greg is that they look so much alike that I almost, my brain kept being like, that's his brother. Oh, no, not in the reality of the movie. That's just his friend.
You never forget that.
Yeah.
Like, because you know who these people are, right? So you're like, it's not like it's this like, Oscar award winning thing where you're like falling into the characters and you lose the actor. No, like, you know that it's the Francos. Yeah. like 100% the whole time. The
fucking Francos. Too many Francos.
Yeah. That's fair. That's what it should have been called. But yeah, I don't know. I just, enjoyed it.
I just didn't enjoy myself. And again, my handle is at Ebony Aster. Feel free to argue with me about it. But this was one opportunity to go to the movies where I was like, not having a good time here. Part of it is that, the things that I have seen of the room, like the bits and pieces on, YouTube or whatever that I've seen. And then, bookending that with James Franco's impression of him in this movie. Like, there's a kind of active malevolence that didn't come across to me in The Disaster Artist. Like, hit me up here. Did anyone else, like, when I think about Tommy Wiseau, I think of a character like Arnold Friend from that Joyce Carol Oates story, Where You Going, Where You've Been? Like, someone who's trying to be younger and someone who's trying to present this, like, this genial face to the world, but underneath there's something, malevolent underneath there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I had a friend who really likes The Room, like, is really a part of that whole cult following. And he felt like the film felt more like what Tommy wanted to make. Like, we got to look into what the Room was supposed to be from Tommy's perspective, which to me, I don't want to give. I think that he's like abusive and awful and possessive, and so I don't want to like give him that. But if I try to remove from that perspective a little bit, like, I think there's something interesting about looking at it or viewing it through that lens of like, what was he really trying to make, and what was this like, this artistic expression that he felt very strongly about, because it's not what we watch and make fun of for a decade, So, yeah. All right. The Disaster Artist.
I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
I thought that the teaser...
I did not.
The teaser that they released, which was just that scene over and over again, was so brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, it really made me want to see this movie because it was great.
It was great. It was very funny.
It was really good. All right, let's dive into some Video games.
Yay, video games. I love video games.
Do you love video games?
Do
you love all of the video games?
I have a complicated relationship with video games. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Wolfenstein II.
Yeah. Maybe before we dive into the substance of the game itself, I just want to quickly talk about the ad campaign a little bit that on social media that led up to the game's release, right? Because I really appreciated the way that ad campaign, particularly like on Twitter, leaned into the presence of white supremacy and, neo-fascists in the U.S. right now by tweeting things like, these are not very fine people, which is a reference to Trump's quote about there were some very fine people and things like that because there is so much crossover and overlap between Gamergate, which was a consumer movement concerned with ethics in game journalism, and the alt-right, that even though it should not be at all like a bold statement for a game company to take a stand and say, hey, Nazis are bad, like, there were actually people who were like, why are you making your game all political? Why are you going with the SJWs? Saying Nazis are bad is now for some is like a big.
It was so funny,
like a debatable point.
How many fucking games exist that you shoot Nazis?
Right.
Like endless amounts.
Yeah. So as somebody who has a lot of skin in the game and cares deeply about games, the culture around games, and also about defeating fascism, I was glad just to see a company take a side in this, right? I appreciated that, but
which it is not hard to take that side, even though I'm with you on it as well. I was like, oh, that's cool that they're doing that. Like, I'm impressed with it, and then I'm like, why am I impressed with this?
Right,
this is not something to be impressed with.
It shouldn't be, but given grading on a curve
context,
relative to how after in the way as Gamergate was happening, the deafening silence from so many companies. Just having a
but
company
there's also
do
a part
this.
of me too that's like, I'm so cynical about it. Like, obviously, do they even give it? Like, you know, it's just to sell their fucking game.
Of course.
And it kind of got me on the hype machine too. Like, that was a really good marketing play for them, and it got me, someone who does not care about this game, excited and interested to play it. And I'm so tired of buying into the hype of bullshit games.
Yeah, so why don't you talk a bit about your experiences with the game, Anita?
So I played 2 hours of it. So there's obviously a lot more story and lore that I could know about. I'm so pissed. Like, I'm so over AAA shooter bullshit. And not all of them, but I feel like they all are just so the same in every way, and I'm exhausted by it. And they're not even, to me, they're not good or enjoyable. And so with Wolfenstein specifically, sure, there are things that we could talk about that are good and bad, and we could be nuanced about it and whatever. But overall, I actually was just angry playing it. I felt like So I was trying to work through some of my feelings around it with a friend, and I was like, it does this thing where it's just so over the top and so campy and just so excessive that it reminded me of Duke Nukem. And then my friend was like, Duke Nukem is based on Wolfenstein and Doom, right? It was influenced by those games, and I was like, oh no shit, right? Obviously, but to me, today, in the way that we tell stories and the stories that we're telling and the what we can do with games, I'm just kind of insulted by it. So I'm not going to spoil anything beyond the first hour of the game, but the scenes with it feels like they're trying to be really progressive in a lot of ways. And to me, it doesn't feel progressive. It feels really regressive, right? So you have a scene with a white dude who's saying the N-word over and over and over again. And you're hiding in a closet and you're supposed to be scared of this guy. He's your dad. And to me, I'm just sitting there being like, really? This is how you're demonstrating this, horribleness?
Yeah, there's no subtlety to it whatsoever, to put it mildly.
There's no subtlety to anything, right? And so, fast forward to when you see, the Fraulein, the Nazi leader woman, that's the first one of the first people you're encountering.
Yeah.
And she she's like a gleeful 12-year-old in her excessive like enjoyment of murdering people, and like she's fat shaming her daughter in this way. It is utterly horrifying to watch.
And of course the defense of that we'll hear is that, well, she's supposed to be bad, and like so the fat shaming of her daughter is also supposed to be bad.
And so that's the thing too, in that like as I was playing the game, I was like, okay, I need to be able to articulate why this is a problem. And this happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like we'll sit and we'll watch something and we'll play something and we'll be like, what is it that's bothering me? I can't quite nail it. And I'm like, I don't want to make Nazis good or nuanced, right? So like, what is my problem with this? And I think some of it is that in the same way that we use violence against women to show that men are worse and really, really bad than the protagonist, who's also shitty, but not as shitty because he doesn't beat women, it's the same kind of thing. And I take a lot of issue with like the abuse of people or the like sorry, I'm not being very articulate today, but the expression of that as the way that you show badness, right? Like
it functions in a way to normalize the behavior even while using it as...
And it makes the player character, who's also doing horrible shit, seem totally reasonable and normal, right?
Yeah.
And so like... Well,
I think part of the problem, having not played any of the game myself, but from the playthroughs that I've watched, part of the problem for me is that when you have depictions of Nazi characters, not just in this game, but part of a long line of depictions of Nazi characters that are these kind of, for lack of a better term, cartoonish depictions, part of what happens is that people start to assume, like, that's how Nazis behave, that's how they look. And anything that doesn't approach that level, that isn't kind of hyperbolic in that same way, isn't really a Nazi. In the same way that if people assume that, like, if you're not actively turning on a fire hose and sicking police dogs on people, you're not really a bad racist. And it's like, no, there are levels to this shit, and there are kind of larger manifestations of this kind of horrible ideology. You don't have to just be like a, stroking your mustache and twirling it like Snidely Whiplash type villain to be a Nazi or, to be a horrible person or to do horrible things.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's also a lot to talk about with regard to the game's portrayal of women, too, because the game has gotten a lot of praise for having a number of prominent, female characters. And certainly, like, I guess, in terms of cultural impact, like, of course, it is like a net positive to have more, characters who aren't, like, sexualized and who are portrayed as like leaders of this movement and everything. Like in a sense, like, yes, it is a quote unquote good thing, but that doesn't mean that it's done perfectly or that we can't take issue with it. And I think that for me, Polygon ranked this as like the number 10 game of the year, and in their piece about it, they talked a lot about the women in the game. And one thing they said was how refreshing in a world in which women's bodies are consistently under threat it is to play a video game that respects women as equals, strong, capable, persistent. And I guess my feeling is that I feel like the game, so BJ, the main character, my feeling is that he like lionizes women, that he kind of puts them on a pedestal, right? Like Anya, his pregnant girlfriend. I mean, he talks about how he wants to keep the fact that he's dying secret from her. He says, like, it's my burden to bear until it's hers. Like, which is not like a great. That's like very kind of stereotypical masculine, kind of keeping something like that to yourself, and it's not a really good relationship model. And also, like, he constantly talks about how Caroline is, like a saint kind of in his eyes. And to me, it's like, I what would have been like truly sort of maybe radical or at least more progressive in this game is what if the player was like the pregnant woman? Like, what if dudes wanting to play this like shooter, quasi power fantasy game had to like play as a pregnant woman? Like, that would be like more challenging. You're still safely embodied in like the body of this,
straight
white man, right?
Totally. So I will say that having a female, like a visibly pregnant female character who I believe is not sidelined. She participates and she fights in the battles.
Definitely.
I really appreciate that because I like too often when women are pregnant, they're like coddled and you have to be like safe and we have to protect you and you like you're useless at that point.
Fallout
right?
shelter, anyone?
Oh man, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that was bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. But for me, like, you know, I read that article too. And yes, there is something important about having female characters, having a lot of them, having them be present and participating and relevant.
And leaders sometimes.
100%.
Yeah.
But for me, like, okay, look, I am cynical as fuck. Like, when you've researched as many female characters in games as I have, at some point you're like, it's really hard for me to get excited about it in the context of a game like this, right? Like 100% people should talk about it. We should analyze those characters. But I think the game is kind of reprehensible. Like, I think it's a shitty shooter to begin with. I don't even think it's like enjoyable to play.
Right. I mean, I think
those difficulty spikes were fucking garbage.
Yeah, the difficulty is really poorly designed. I don't think it's a fundamentally good shooter.
It's not doing anything new or interesting, right? Like, I'm like, oh, there are Nazis hiding on this ship for 8 months. Oh, convenient that I had to go shoot them all right now. Like, it's just, there's nothing interesting about it from that perspective. And I want more. Like, it's not that I don't want shooters to exist. I think that they can definitely be a part of the environment of games as they should. I just want to see an evolution in them. I want to see something more happening in these spaces where it's not just like, here is cutscene story, here is shooting things, here's cutscene story. And like the thing with Wolfenstein is I cannot get down with how disgustingly exaggerated the violence is. Like, I do not want to see heads rolling off and then like carrying headless bodies onto a ship and then I'm supposed to have feelings about this. Like, I just said it. Like, I can't. Yeah. It's I know that I'm not explaining this well because I'm still trying to process how I feel about it and why the exaggeration bothers me so much. Because I think that that's a useful storytelling technique in some contexts. It's just the reveling in it, I think, that I have such a hard time with. Like, it's so, not self-aggrandizing, but like smug, I guess. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's it. Mm-hmm. A podcast is a really weird place to work out your feelings.
But it's like, all we have.
Maybe, I know, I'm like, maybe in like a week I could be like, oh shit, I don't agree with any of this, and I figured out the answer. But I guess that's what happens when you do this weekly, right? When you don't have time to sit and process your feelings, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really annoyed by this game in a lot of ways. Well, then let's move on to my favoritely titled "What's Your Deal?"
Oh, okay, wow! I love that you just made up a word. Favoritely. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, y'all. We've gotten a lot of messages of people liking "What's Your Deal?"
Of course.
I've only gotten a couple from you that don't like it. So y'all better speak up because I am losing this battle. Also, Ebony came up with a new one. What was it? Like, the fuck's your problem?
Fuck's your problem.
Which I almost love more. So those are your two choices, if you ask me. Yeah, but I felt like that was on brand for us.
So, okay. Well, it's still "What's Your Deal" for the time being.
Yeah.
Ebony, the fuck's your problem?
Anita?
No, what's your deal?
I'll tell you, I have two things. One is, in a continuing effort to give you a peek at how this podcast is recorded. So, I'm watching Anita right now on this tiny computer screen, and she's got hair escaping from her top bun, and she looks like alfalfa, and it's the most adorable thing I've ever seen. I can't focus on anything else. No, okay, so what my deal this week is I want to shout out artist called Quinta Brunson, who does web series and videos. Most people probably know her from the work she does for BuzzFeed. She had this incredibly viral video where she milli rocks around the world. As y'all know from the short, 5 episodes we've had so far, I'm like Issa Rae, okay? I'm always rooting for the Black people. I'm team natural hair. So I'm always going to shout out Black content creators. So Quinta Brunson, she's funny. She's just, like smart and cool. One of my favorite videos of hers is natural hair versus the perm, which is hilarious. I encourage you to go check it out. You can find her at Quinta Brunson on Twitter, but today, December 11th, she has a new web series called Quinta versus Everything coming out that you can watch via Facebook Watch, and it just looks hilarious. Watch the trailer alone for her being a glammed up Mario, and you will lose your mind. So that's my deal for the week. Me shouting out Team Natural Hair and more Black people, as is my want.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Carol, what's your deal?
My deal this week is a film on Netflix. It's under the Netflix Originals banner. It's called My Happy Family, and it is a film from Georgia, not the state, but the country. And it is about, a middle-aged woman who lives in this household with, her elderly parents, her husband, her children who are in their early 20s, her daughter's husband. It's this house that's just bursting with generations of people. And she decides to go live in an apartment by herself. And I believe her decision comes from just being tired of being expected to do the tremendous amount of emotional labor that a woman is expected to do when kind of surrounded by, just kind of embedded in that kind of life, her entire life. And her decision to do this sends, uproars through her family. Everyone objects. They don't understand. And, you see her in her apartment, and there's these quiet scenes of her just listening to music and just doing little things for herself, right? Which probably throughout her whole life, she's really almost never had even a moment to indulge in things just for herself. And so it's very much like a slice of life movie, which is, probably my favorite kind of film. It's very observant of its characters. It's very the acting is very naturalistic. You really feel like you're seeing real people go through the stuff of their daily lives, and it doesn't in any way kind of try to hit you over the head with its themes, but just through telling this honest sort of story of this woman doing this thing, making this change in her life, all these things about patriarchy and emotional labor and the expectations that are placed on women in, so many cultures just kind of naturally are illuminated. And it's just so wonderfully acted and so lively. It's, I just think it's a really beautiful film. So my Netflix recommendation for the moment is My Happy Family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
She sounds like a superhero, frankly. Leaving a bunch of people behind to go live by herself. I support it.
So my deal this week. So I fly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of shit on planes. Mm-hmm. And usually I take the opportunity to watch the stuff that I didn't have time to, that I feel like I should know about, and that just kind of thing on planes. But this time, flying back, I was scanning through the options, and I saw that Broadchurch season 3 was on. I was flying British Airways, so they had a bunch of British shows. And I don't know why I forgot about Broadchurch. I really liked the first season. Did y'all watch Broadchurch?
I watched all of the first season and part of season 2.
Okay, so I watched all of the first season. Did you like it?
I did, but it's one of those things, and I know I say this as, a crime drama obsessive, but it was so depressing.
Yeah, totally.
It's not something I can rewatch.
I watched the first one. I think I watched the second one, but I have literally no memory of it. And I was like, whatever. They're each season is self-contained for the most part. It helps if you know the backstory of some of the characters. But I don't love procedurals, and I don't love crime dramas for reasons that we've talked about on the podcast, right? Where it's the state always wins and you always catch the bad guy, et cetera, et cetera. I think Broadchurch does it a little bit I don't know, does it better, does it in a way that I can get behind more. Also, I'll watch anything with David Tennant in it, so let's be real. That's a huge part of this as well.
Brother.
But okay, so season 3, the the narrative around season 3 is that a woman who is nearing her 50s has been attacked and raped, and by a stranger. She was knocked out. And the beginning of the first episode, you see her reporting to the police, and you see the police taking, her statement and doing all the stuff. Okay, I started crying a lot watching the first couple of episodes, and I was not being triggered. That's not what was happening here. And it took me a little while to figure out why I was reacting so strongly. It was because in this show, they treat survivors and victims with such compassion and care. Yeah. Like I'm tearing up just thinking about watching this again. I cannot think of another example in the media in which I've seen a representation of treating sexual assault survivors with so much respect and belief. To the degree that she says, "Do you believe me?" And they say yes, unequivocally. And as you watch the entire show, you can tell that without a doubt they consulted with advocates, like sexual assault advocates, because there are very, very pointed, specific things that are addressed and brought up. And so a couple of the things that I really liked in it are that, one, you see, so obviously this is through, this takes place in Britain. It's through the British system, I think. You see, when she's brought into the police station for the first time, there is someone there who is not an officer that is there. She's an advocate to specifically help her, walk her through and be there for emotional support and explain how things are and communicate with the cops if she doesn't feel comfortable. And then for the rest of the show, you see she gets connected to an advocate from a local organization that is strictly there just to support the survivor. So anything you need day and night. If you don't want to talk to the cops, you don't talk to the cops. If you don't, if you want me to hold your hand while we go and do the statement, if you need anything, right? And so just watching that support and that care was just remarkable. And you have these moments in it where one of the other officers, who is a woman, actually says, "Well, what was she wearing? Was she drunk?" And the Miller, who is the other woman, the main
female lead,
the female lead, yes, thank you, is like, "How fucking dare you?" Just rips her a new one. And so anytime that you see these moments of victim blaming, it's called out instantly. Without a doubt, there's no question that this is a thing that happened. And then I think that there's something really valuable in the support workers. Actually, this woman who was helping her is sort of new at this, and she says, who supports the support workers, right? The secondary trauma that comes out in these spaces. So I kind of highly recommend it because I've never had such a strong reaction to a crime procedural, and I've never seen this kind of care and compassion presented in this way in these kinds of stories. So
yeah, and I think
obviously
Anita,
it can be really triggering for people. So that comes with a big warning.
Anita, I think you will be pleasantly optimistic because Chris Chibnall, who is the showrunner and writer for Broadchurch, is the new showrunner for Doctor Who.
What?
Yeah, so
yay!
So they're replacing Stephen Moffat with someone who I hope we can put our faith in.
That's so exciting. And also Jodie Whittaker is on there, who is the new Doctor. Yep. The woman who plays Miller, who's the female detective, I fucking love her.
Me too.
The thing about British, I was I kind of want her to be the Doctor, to be honest, but whatever. I think Jodie Whittaker.
She was in an episode of Doctor Who when Matt Smith. In fact, she was at Matt Smith's first outing. Olivia Colman.
I don't remember that. All right. Well, that's cool. There's something about I feel like there's some, so a lot of British television has different problems than our American television does, and so having this was almost everyone in the cast in the story of this season is in their 50s, right? It's not a show about young people necessarily, and women are still considered desirable, and they're not everyone's not a fucking supermodel. There's just it feels a little more sincere and genuine in terms of the casting and who, whatever. I highly recommend it. So That's me. That's my deal. I'm so excited for the new Doctor Who. All right, that's our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday. Once again, a big, huge thanks to our Drip backers. Drip is Kickstarter's brand new subscription-based crowdfunding platform. And guess what? We're listener-supported. That means you. Every dollar you contribute goes directly to producing this podcast. So if you want to pitch in and join this community, we've got some great rewards for you. Head over to d.rip/femfreak and join us. If you want to help us reach our end-of-year fundraising goal to keep everything we do at Feminist Frequency free and available to all people with internet access, please visit feministfrequency.com/donate. If you like this show, we would love it if you would leave a review for us wherever you are listening to this. It really helps spread the word. And you can also spread the word on things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and with all of your friends, because they might like us too. You can check out all of our work and all of our other podcasts at feministfrequency.com, and you can find each of us on Twitter. I am at Anita Sarkeesian.
I'm at Carolyn Michelle.
I am at Pam Greer's gun holster. That's one word. Or you can find me at Ebony Aster, but I don't check that account as often.
That's such a lie. Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed our theme music. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.